Air, it's a simple need. But who would have ever thought something so basic could cause breakdowns, delays, and headaches for the truck fleet and their customers? Because something as simple as a disabled tire can cause lost time, money, possibly even serious injury. While technology has designed high-quality, innovative tires, it's still the inflation pressure inside that allows the tire to support the load, absorb the bumps, and grip the pavement. So let's take a basic look at what's going on inside those tires. When a truck is lifted on a jack, taking the load off the tire now has a rounded shape. Back on solid ground, it's obvious that the shape of the tire changes as the load increases. Inflation pressure can only be determined by a certified inflation gauge. You cannot determine the inflation based on the shape alone. The shape of the unloaded upper section of the tire changes little, if any, and even though the shape of the lower portion changes, the total volume of air and pressure remains the same. Back on the road, each part of that tire is constantly changing shape hundreds of times a minute. That's a lot of flexing those sidewalls. Tire design is built around the idea of maintaining that flex at the right amount in the right area. It's common knowledge that the amount of flex is determined by the amount of inflation. For a given load, less inflation, more flex. More inflation, less flex. Put more inflation in the tire and the pressure obviously goes up. It follows then that the flex will go down. Of course, the reverse is true. Flex will be too great when there is too little inflation pressure in the tire. Too little flex or too much flex can lead to costly breakdowns. Too much flexing causes the tire to build up excessive heat. One result is not only higher fuel costs for the truck company, but more importantly, heat damage, which shortens the life of the tire. That's when lost time and money on roadside pullovers and delayed arrivals occur. On the other hand, too much inflation pressure can reduce a tire's shock-absorbing ability, resulting in a rough ride. And tires are more likely to suffer many other types of damage, such as impact brakes. Vehicle manufacturers specify tire pressures on the certification label found on the tractor door jamb. Trailer tire information is found on a placard usually mounted near the nose of the trailer. On a bus or motor coach, the label is usually near the main entrance door or the driver's seat. You can also check for tire pressure information on the owner or service manuals. Using the tires, wheels, and inflation pressures specified on the placards ensures that the components can not only carry the loads, but also maintain other performance characteristics intended by the vehicle manufacturer, such as speed capability, ride, and handling. Alternate tire, wheel, or inflation pressure specifications could be recommended for your particular operation, but only taking into account increasingly complex technical details and your actual service conditions. So obtain specific advice from a tire or vehicle manufacturer before making tire, wheel, or pressure changes. Or you could ask your Bridgestone dealer, representative, or contact Bridgestone Technical Services. Bridgestone Technical Services and field engineers are always ready to assist you in optimizing tire performance and getting the most from your investment. If all tires were kept at the proper inflation pressure, millions of dollars could be saved every single day in fuel, tire life, breakdowns, and repairs. To make that happen, proper tire pressure requires regular checking and maintenance. Even when properly inflated and with routine use, truck tires can still lose 2 or more psi of inflation per month. Inflation can leak out between the bead and the wheel, especially if the wheel is corroded or dirty. Dirt and ice could even cause a leak by holding open the valve core. That makes a steel, threaded, sealing valve cap a necessity. Good quality flow-through caps are also available and will make it easier to check the inflation pressure. And keep an eye on the valve stem seals. They can crack and deteriorate over time. It's a good idea to replace them every time a tire is mounted. A tire inflation gauge is the only way to accurately determine a tire's inflation pressure. You cannot determine inflation pressure by thumping the tire or looking at the sidewall. You should use a good inflation gauge and check your gauge against the master gauge weekly. Gauges are sensitive instruments, and the ones that are found to be inaccurate should be either recalibrated or replaced. But in spite of routine maintenance, small inflation losses will still occur because molecules will pass right through the tire and escape. So every day, as a routine part A pre-trip inspection, check the tire's inflation pressure. And since a tire's recommended inflation pressure is a cold pressure reading, do that check before driving begins. A long trip in hot weather can push a tire's inflation pressure up to 15 to 20%. Even short distance drives can heat up the tire and the pressure will increase. The tire's temperature and pressure will level out at some point while driving, but it can still take 3 to 4 hours after stopping for the tire to cool down, and then the accurate cold inflation can then be measured. Inflation pressures are intended to be measured when cold. The misconception here is that a pressure reading on a hot tire appears high, so the impulse is to let out the excess pressure. If you do that, then that tire becomes underinflated later when it cools. Remember, it's important to check cold inflation pressure. While you're at it, check tires for damage or wear. And then, if you have duals, be sure to check the inner tires as well. Simple steps, routine maintenance, every day. That makes you a critical part of the trucking industry. Trucks keep moving because you have the skills to get the most out of the tires. The skills to make sure the right amount of inflation is in the right place at all times.